everyone. It is a pleasure for me to be here with you virtually today. I would like to begin by asking you to reflect on the following question. What do you think it is like to be an informal caregiver and to navigate through the healthcare system in the current context? I would like to draw your attention to the title of this presentation, which summarizes the lived experience of one of our participants who described it as like being on a sinking boat. Let's begin by defining what an informal caregiver is. Informal caregivers are individuals who provide unpaid care to a loved one with a long-term health condition, a physical or mental disability, or aging-related needs. For instance, this could be an adult child driving one of their parents to their bi-weekly medical appointments out of town and cooking meals for them every day. 1 in 4 Canadians are informal caregivers, and they provide between 70 and 80% of community care for older adults, and 54% of unpaid caregivers are women. What we know from the literature is that there's a pressing need to provide financial support to caregivers, and that informal caregiving has negative consequences on caregivers' health and well-being. However, we have very limited knowledge about Francophone caregivers' experiences, as they're often excluded from studies, leaving behind a fairly large minority group with different cultural ties. This study draws on a rich data set of interviews with New Brunswick informal caregivers that were conducted by Drs. Poulin, and Lafrance, and focuses on 6 qualitative interviews with Francophone informal caregivers of older adults. The research questions that guided this study were: how do informal caregivers manage the multifaceted demands of caregiving? What social, cultural, or institutional practices or policies complicate their lives? And how does the intersection of gender, language, and culture and geographic location influence the everyday realities of caregivers? To answer these questions, we use the psychosocial ethnography of the commonplace methodology, which is a qualitative and interdisciplinary methodology that was developed by Drs. and Poulin to examine the lived realities of marginalized groups. If you would like to know more about this methodology, please go ahead and scan the QR code on the slide. The PSAC data analysis involves 4 phases. First, a thematic analysis. Second, the identification and analysis of organizational moments, which are formal or informal social or institutional events, policies, or practices that benefit the institutions while complicating the lives of marginalized individuals, in this case, informal caregivers. Third, the analysis of schemata evoked to make sense of the organizational moments and of the coping strategies utilized to manage these complications. And fourth, the development of recommendations to guide social and cultural change. The results of this study pertain to the organizational moment, hidden costs of informal care. Feel free to pause the video here to take a closer look at this table, which illustrates our findings. Due to time constraints, I will only be focusing on one element of each category during this presentation. Gerard illustrated the lack of institutional support as a complication that informal caregivers encounter in their role by saying, "The social worker, I never felt like she wanted to help me. There are no resources for informal caregivers." Noemi provided an example of the schema of fraud employed by informal caregivers in our study to make sense of the complications brought into their lives by the hidden cost of informal care. She said, "It's difficult for the province to offer services that are fair because there's always fraudsters." To cope with the complications she encountered, Lucien employed the cognitive coping strategy of positive thinking, which can be illustrated here when she said, "I get paid in another way. I'm healthy. I don't have cancer. I'm blessed in another way." The government and the healthcare system benefit from the hidden costs of informal care that are borne by informal caregivers, as illustrated by Gerard's quote. "For my mother's care, it is me who takes care of her, not the government. You know, in a way, I'm helping them." To further illustrate Gerard's claim, over a decade ago, informal caregivers' annual contribution to the Canadian healthcare system was estimated to $26 billion in unpaid work. A few of our recommendations are to create a task force for and with informal caregivers to address their unique needs and situations and to explore solutions to adapt current services and support, to adopt a federal approach to eliminate the current disparities in the offer of services between provinces, and to develop and implement workplace policies adapted for informal caregivers. Here are our references, and thank you for your attention. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us.